My name is Jessica Smith, I'm 28, and if someone had told me my life would change in a single weekend, I wouldn't have believed them. Everything began when my in-laws announced, out of nowhere, that they were flying to Hawaii and leaving me in charge of my niece, Lily. According to them, she couldn't speak, barely moved, and needed constant care. I agreed, though reluctantly, thinking I could handle a few days. Little did I know, my world was about to be turned upside down. The moment I stepped inside their pristine house, I felt a mix of awe and anxiety. Every surface gleamed, every frame on the wall captured perfect smiles. But there was a coldness too, a strict order that pressed down on me like an invisible weight. Lily sat quietly in the living room, her eyes tracking every movement I made. There was a sharp intelligence in them, despite her supposed silence. I tried to speak softly, offering her a coloring book and some snacks. She didn't respond at first, just stared, unblinking. Tension in the room was palpable. It was as if the house itself was watching me, waiting to see if I would fail. The air smelled faintly of polished wood and something floral, making the silence even more surreal. After a few minutes, she leaned slightly toward me, her voice barely a whisper but unmistakable. "They want my money, help me!" My chest tightened. I froze, unsure if I had heard correctly. Could a child really be speaking about something like that? My mind raced. I realized quickly that this weekend would be unlike anything I had ever experienced. Every detail of the house suddenly felt important. The way the curtains were drawn, the way the furniture was arranged, the pictures on the wall. I knew I had to stay alert. Lily's whisper wasn't just a random comment, it was a warning. And I had no idea what exactly I was being warned about. I set down my bag and tried to focus on small, practical things, arranging her blankets, laying out her toys, keeping her comfortable. Each movement was deliberate, careful. I couldn't risk upsetting her or triggering anything I didn't understand. It was clear she had been underestimated for years, and I was about to learn just how sharp and aware she really was. As the day went on, I felt the weight of responsibility pressing down. I wasn't just babysitting, I was guarding a secret, one that could unravel everything my in-laws had built around this child. I needed to be smart, careful, and above all, patient. By the afternoon, I started talking to her, even though she barely responded. I asked simple questions, watched for gestures, tiny nods, the subtlest changes in expression. Every movement carried meaning. Every glance revealed something she had been holding back for years. The house, with its immaculate floors and polished surfaces, no longer felt comforting. Felt like a stage, and I was part of a drama whose script I hadn't read. Each tick of the clock reminded me that time was slipping, and that whatever secret Lily carried would soon demand action. As evening fell, I realized that the quiet of the house was deceptive. It wasn't empty, it was alive with tension, with unspoken truths. And I had stepped into the middle of it, with no idea how to navigate the storm that was about to hit. The night was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that makes every sound echo. Lily's bedroom was neat and simple, but her presence made it feel charged. I set up her favorite blanket and a small nightlight, hoping to make her feel safe. She watched me carefully, her expression unreadable. I sensed she was testing me, assessing whether I was trustworthy. I tried to rest on the couch, but sleep didn't come easily. Every creak of the house sounded like a warning. I couldn't shake the memory of her whisper, the way she had said, "They want my money, help me." The words replayed in my mind, urgent and haunting. What could she possibly mean? I spent the night thinking about the in-laws, how perfect they seemed on the surface and how calculating they must be underneath. My husband Michael was kind and loving, but his family was another world entirely. The stakes were higher than I realized. By early morning, I found myself drawn to Lily's side, observing her as she moved slowly, deliberately. She had a routine, a method to everything she did. I realized quickly that this was no ordinary child. She was brilliant, calculating, and far more aware than anyone around her suspected. Breakfast was quiet. I prepared simple foods, careful not to upset her. She ate slowly, as if each bite were part of a plan, a strategy. I felt increasingly like a participant in something much bigger than a typical weekend of babysitting. As I tried to engage her with conversation, I noticed subtle signs, a shift in posture, the narrowing of her eyes, a twitch of a finger, that hinted she understood far more than she let on. My nerves were on edge. Everything about her demanded vigilance. By mid-morning, I realized I had entered a delicate dance. Every movement I made, every word I spoke, had to be calculated. I was no longer just Jessica Smith, niece-sitter. I was a guardian, a confidant, and perhaps even an ally in a hidden battle I barely understood. The house seemed to respond to our presence, each room holding its own secrets. Even mundane spaces, the kitchen, the living room, the hallways, felt alive with tension. I knew instinctively that I had to pay attention to every detail. When Lily finally looked up and gave a subtle nod, I felt a strange mixture of fear and determination. She was signaling trust, but conditional trust. I had no choice but to honor it. By noon, I felt the first real weight of responsibility. I couldn't just watch over her. I had to understand her, decode her, anticipate the moves of people who had trained her to remain silent and secretive. This weekend was about to change everything. Afternoon sunlight spilled through the blinds, highlighting the quiet precision with which Lily moved about the room. Every step, every gesture seemed intentional, as if she were silently directing a game only she understood. I followed her carefully, trying not to disrupt her rhythm, that I began piecing together the fragments she gave me. Her whisper about her money wasn't idle chatter, it was a plea. Someone had been scheming, manipulating, and Lily had been carrying the burden alone. My stomach twisted at the thought. How long had this been going on? I asked gentle questions, not expecting answers, but listening for clues in the way she tilted her head, the flicker of her eyes, or the smallest movements of her hands. Each subtle cue was a window into a hidden world. By late afternoon, I realized that Lily had orchestrated a silent communication system with me. She wasn't voiceless, she was cautious, careful, protecting herself until she could trust me. My respect for her intelligence grew with every passing hour. I moved cautiously through the house, noting every detail, every locked cabinet, every photograph, every pattern that could hold a secret. Each discovery made me more aware of the stakes. My in-laws' absence was no coincidence, it was an opportunity. As evening approached, the tension in the house thickened. I felt eyes watching from shadows, from corners, as if the walls themselves held their gaze. Lily remained calm, but I sensed her alertness, like a tiny sentinel guiding me through unseen dangers. I prepared a small snack, keeping my movements slow, deliberate, predictable. She watched me carefully, then reached out and touched my hand briefly, a gesture of trust. My heart leapt. It was a small connection, but it mattered. Later, I noticed subtle patterns in the household objects, the furniture, the lighting. Everything was precise, arranged with purpose. My in-laws were meticulous people, but there was something more, something calculated beneath the perfection. By nightfall, I sat with Lily quietly, listening to her soft, deliberate breathing. I realized I had to be patient, cautious, and attentive. One wrong move could shatter the fragile trust we were building. The day ended with a sense of unease and anticipation. I understood that this weekend was only the beginning, and that Lily's secret had the power to change everything. The next morning, sunlight filtered softly through the blinds. Lily was already awake, seated with perfect posture, eyes observing every movement I made. I realized that she had been waiting, watching for me to prove myself capable. I tried to speak gently, asking her simple questions, offering choices, but she responded sparingly, with subtle gestures, a blink, a tilt of the head. I realized quickly that I had to decode her language. Each motion mattered. Breakfast was silent, measured. She ate slowly, deliberately, testing my patience, my awareness. Every bite seemed to convey meaning, a signal I had to interpret. I couldn't afford mistakes. Afterward, I explored small corners of the house, noting locked drawers and subtle signs that indicated careful planning. I realized that Lily's world was contained, structured, and shielded, but also vulnerable. As the morning wore on, I sensed a silent urgency in her gaze. She wanted to communicate, to warn, to share her truth. But she needed me to earn her trust fully before revealing it completely. I spent hours talking softly, observing, guiding, and learning. Her intelligence and awareness impressed me constantly. She was no ordinary child. She was far beyond what anyone believed. By afternoon, small discoveries revealed the layers of complexity in her life. Hidden notes, subtle patterns, and cautious gestures hinted at a deeper story, one I was only beginning to understand. I realized that the responsibility I carried was immense. It wasn't just about care, it was about protection, secrecy, and moral choice. Every hour heightened my awareness, sharpened my senses. Lily's safety depended on me, and I felt the gravity of my role. That evening, as shadows stretched across the house, I understood that this weekend would not end quietly. Secrets would surface, alliances would be tested, and my life would be irreversibly changed. The morning light felt colder than usual as I walked into the living room. Lily was already seated in her favorite chair, eyes tracking my every move. I felt a shiver run down my spine. She wasn't just observing me, she was assessing, calculating. Every tilt of her head, every blink seemed deliberate, as if she was silently measuring my intentions. I offered her some breakfast, placing the plate carefully on the table. She didn't eat immediately. Instead, she studied me, her gaze sharp and unreadable. I realized that she was testing me, silently asking, "Are you trustworthy? Can you protect me?" My heart pounded as I nodded inwardly, promising I would. After breakfast, I began tidying the room, moving cautiously. Every step I took, I felt like I was stepping into a minefield. Lily followed me with her eyes, quiet but commanding. Her presence was heavy, a constant reminder that this weekend was about far more than babysitting. I tried talking to her, asking simple questions about what she liked, what made her comfortable. She responded with a subtle tilt of the head, a faint smile, and sometimes nothing at all. But in that nothing, I sensed everything. She had learned to communicate in silence, and I needed to learn her language. The day passed slowly. I arranged toys, books, and small games to keep her engaged. She accepted them, but often ignored what I thought would entertain her. She was already teaching me patience, showing me that control wasn't mine to claim. By mid-afternoon, I noticed her glancing at the locked cabinet in the corner. My curiosity spiked, but I didn't act immediately. I could feel that whatever lay behind it was important, and she was waiting to see if I respected her boundaries. I tried reading her favorite book aloud, but she didn't respond as expected. Instead, she reached for my hand, guiding me gently to sit beside her. The gesture was subtle but powerful. I realized that trust wasn't given, it was earned moment by moment. Evening approached, and the air in the house felt heavier, charged with tension. I sensed unspoken rules and hidden dangers, carefully layered over years of manipulation and secrecy. I had to stay alert. By bedtime, I felt exhausted but alert. Lily lay in her bed quietly, eyes wide open in the dim light. I couldn't shake the feeling that she knew far more than she had shared, and that every silent movement was a message I needed to decode. That night, I lay on the couch, replaying every gesture, every glance, every whisper. I understood one undeniable truth. This weekend would demand courage, patience, and attention like I had never given before. The next morning, the sun cast long shadows through the blinds, illuminating the immaculate house. Lily was already awake, quietly moving through her routines with precise, deliberate motions. I watched her, trying to anticipate her needs without overwhelming her. I prepared her breakfast, keeping everything minimal and calm. She ate slowly, as if each bite was measured, each movement intentional. I felt like I was learning a new language, one without words but full of meaning. After breakfast, I tried speaking gently about small, ordinary things, favorite colors, toys, movies, but she only responded with subtle gestures. Till I felt progress. She was letting me in, letting me see a glimpse of the intelligence and awareness she had been hiding. I began exploring the house more carefully, noting small details, books, papers, locked drawers. Each object seemed intentional, each arrangement deliberate. I understood that her environment had been carefully curated, and that I had to respect it if I wanted her trust. By mid-afternoon, I realized the complexity of the world I had entered. The silence wasn't emptiness, it was protection. Lily had learned early that words could be dangerous, that trust was scarce, and that she had to be cautious with everyone around her. I moved slowly, consciously, aware that every motion was being observed. She had eyes like a hawk, tracking my every move. I felt the weight of responsibility more acutely than ever. One wrong step, one careless gesture, and I could lose the fragile trust she was granting me. Even small interactions carried weight. Offering her water, helping her sit, passing her toys, all required focus, patience, and understanding. I felt like I was walking on a tightrope, constantly aware of unseen consequences. By evening, I tried reading her favorite story aloud again. This time, she responded with a faint smile and a soft nod. It was a small victory, but it felt monumental. I realized that trust, once earned, could unlock everything. Night fell, and I stayed alert on the couch, listening for any unusual sounds. The house, quiet and polished, seemed alive with secrets. I sensed that my in-laws' absence had created an opening, an opportunity for truths long hidden to surface. I lay awake, thinking about her whispered words. "They want my money, help me!" What did it mean? Who exactly wanted what? I knew instinctively that uncovering the answers would change everything. Morning arrived with a warm glow, but I felt uneasy. Lily was already up, her routine precise as ever. I noticed subtle changes in her behavior, small cues that suggested something important was about to happen. I offered her breakfast, careful with timing, tone, and placement of utensils. She ate methodically, each motion deliberate. I was beginning to see a pattern in her silence, a rhythm that conveyed meaning without words. Curiosity gnawed at me. I decided to explore the room she spent the most time in. Every cabinet, every drawer seemed ordinary, but I knew appearances were deceiving. Something hidden, something critical lay beneath the surface. I asked her gently about the cabinets, the drawers, the photos on the wall. She tilted her head subtly, almost approvingly, before gesturing toward a locked drawer. My pulse quickened. That small motion spoke volumes. Throughout the morning, I noticed other subtle cues, shifts in her posture, slight tugs at clothing, fleeting eye contact. She was trying to communicate, but carefully, cautiously, ensuring she remained in control of the situation. I felt the weight of my role pressing down on me. This wasn't just babysitting. I was a guardian, a confidant, and potentially the only ally she could rely on in a household that had taught her to remain silent. By afternoon, I started piecing together patterns, her reactions to different sounds, times of day, and my actions. It was exhausting mentally and emotionally, but I felt a growing sense of connection, of understanding. Even as shadows lengthened in the house, I felt a sense of urgency building. Something was coming, something that required our combined awareness, our patience, our vigilance. As evening approached, I realized the weekend was about to shift. Lily's whispers, her gestures, and the house itself were all signals. I needed to interpret them correctly, or risk losing the trust we had painstakingly built. That night, I lay on the couch, alert and tense, knowing that the next day would bring revelations, challenges, and perhaps the first true glimpse into the secret she had been protecting. The next day started quietly, but the tension was palpable. Lily moved through the room with familiar precision, her eyes alert, reading me as carefully as I watched her. Each gesture seemed significant, each blink a hidden message. I kept my actions slow and deliberate, knowing that one mistake could break the fragile trust we had established. Breakfast passed in measured silence, with each bite an exercise in observation and patience. After breakfast, I began gently exploring the nuances of her world, books, toys, and objects arranged in precise order. I realized that her environment wasn't just about comfort, it was protection, training, and communication. By mid-morning, I sensed a shift. Her eyes flicked toward the front door, then to me, and I felt a subtle urgency. Something was approaching, and she wanted me to be ready. We spent the day in cautious rhythm, me observing her, her guiding me with slight gestures. I understood that trust was still conditional, fragile, yet growing. Each small connection mattered more than anything I had encountered before. By afternoon, I noticed subtle markings on her drawing pad, tiny symbols, arrows, and patterns. She was leaving me clues, teaching me her silent language one piece at a time. Evening fell, and the house seemed to grow heavier. Shadows stretched across the walls, each creak magnified. I knew instinctively that my in-laws' absence had left us in a delicate balance. I tried speaking gently, offering reassurances, keeping the atmosphere calm. She responded with a faint smile, and I felt a rush of relief. It was a small sign, but it meant we were aligned, ready for what was coming. By bedtime, I felt exhausted but vigilant. The weekend had only begun, yet every hour had taught me lessons in patience, perception, and trust. Lily's secret loomed closer with every passing moment. As I lay awake, I thought about her whisper, "They want my money, help me!" I didn't yet understand everything, but I knew one thing with certainty: this weekend would change us both forever. The next morning, sunlight spilled softly across the living room, but the warmth did nothing to ease my nerves. Lily was awake, sitting in her usual spot, eyes tracking every movement I made. There was an intensity there that made my chest tighten, a mix of trust, fear, and urgency. I knew she was silently testing me again. I offered her breakfast, careful with the placement of each item, the colors of the fruit, the order of the cereal. She ate deliberately, and every motion felt like part of a subtle code I had yet to understand. The smallest gesture seemed to carry meaning, and I knew I had to pay attention. After breakfast, I tried reading her favorite story aloud. She listened quietly, but then turned to me with a faint, knowing smile. I felt a thrill of connection, a spark that told me she was beginning to trust me. I couldn't let that go. I spent the morning tidying her space, arranging toys, adjusting blankets, all while observing the subtle ways she moved. Her silence was deliberate, controlled, almost like a shield she had learned to wield from years of careful observation. By midday, I realized the complexity of her world. Every drawer, every book, every picture on the wall was part of a carefully constructed routine. My in-laws' perfection masked a far deeper, far more calculated reality. She began leaving small notes around the room, tiny scribbles, simple symbols. First, I didn't understand, but gradually I realized she was trying to communicate her truth to me, teaching me to see the hidden signals. By afternoon, the tension in the house grew heavier. Polished floors, the perfect furniture, even the way sunlight filtered through the blinds seemed charged with significance. I felt as if every object held a secret, and I was being called to uncover it. I watched her as she moved through the house, careful and precise, aware of every corner, every shadow. Her awareness was astonishing. She was not a passive child. She was a strategist, observing the world silently but with unmatched intelligence. By evening, I felt exhausted but focused. Each gesture, each blink, each subtle motion had revealed a tiny piece of the puzzle. I was learning her language of trust, patience, and vigilance. As night fell, I lay on the couch, listening to the silence. The house seemed alive with secrets, each whisper of the wind carrying an unspoken message. And I knew that the weekend was far from over. Morning came slowly, but the house felt charged, almost electric. Lily was already up, her posture perfect, her eyes alert. She moved through her morning routine with deliberate care, as if she were preparing for something important. I offered her breakfast with careful attention to detail, arranging the plate just so. She ate methodically, testing me silently. Each small gesture she made felt like a coded message, and I concentrated on deciphering it with unwavering focus. After breakfast, I began exploring the subtle intricacies of her world, the arrangement of her toys, the patterns in her books, the small details in her drawings. Each discovery revealed layers of intelligence and strategy one had never expected from a child. By mid-morning, she led me toward a drawer I hadn't noticed before. A tiny lock secured it, and I could sense her intent. She wanted me to wait to prove my patience. I nodded to myself and stepped back. Trust was earned, and I was determined to respect that. The hours passed slowly. We moved in silent coordination, exchanging small gestures, glances, and subtle signs. I felt more connected to her with every passing minute, understanding the depth of her intelligence and the careful control she had maintained for years. By afternoon, the tension intensified. Polished walls, the quiet rooms, even the shadows seemed to watch our movements. I realized the house itself was a stage for secrets and strategy, and I had to navigate it carefully. She finally whispered something so softly I almost didn't hear it. "They're coming back soon. Be ready." My stomach dropped. Who was coming back? My in-laws? Someone else? I had no answers, only the urgent sense of preparation. Evening approached, and I tried to maintain calm. We played small games, read a book, and I spoke gently, observing every response. Her faint smiles and subtle nods told me she was testing my loyalty, my patience, and my understanding. By bedtime, I felt a combination of exhaustion and anticipation. The weekend had been far more intense than I had imagined. Every moment was a lesson in vigilance, trust, and subtle communication. As I lay on the couch, I replayed her words and gestures over and over in my mind. Something big was coming, and I knew we had to be ready. The following morning, I woke to find Lily already awake, moving with familiar precision. Her eyes locked on mine, scanning for any sign of doubt or hesitation. I felt a shiver run down my spine. She was evaluating me once again. I prepared breakfast carefully, observing her every reaction. Each bite, each movement was deliberate, and I felt as if I were learning a silent language. It was exhausting, but also mesmerizing. After breakfast, I began paying closer attention to the house itself. Every drawer, every picture, every detail seemed placed with purpose. I realized this weekend wasn't just about caring for her. It was about understanding her world and the secrets it contained. She gestured subtly toward a cabinet I hadn't opened. Her eyes conveyed urgency, but also caution. I waited patiently, knowing that trust was the key to unlocking her message. She had been trained to protect herself, and I had to respect that. Hours passed with quiet observation. I noticed patterns in her gestures, the way she shifted her hands, the small glances at objects around her. Each movement was a clue, and I was slowly learning to read her world. By afternoon, I realized the stakes. Her whispered words about money weren't idle. Someone was scheming, and she had been carrying the burden alone. My responsibility was no longer just care, it was protection. Evening fell, and I sat beside her quietly, letting her guide our interactions. The house felt charged, alive with secrets and anticipation. I sensed a truth waiting to be revealed, but it depended on patience and understanding. She leaned slightly toward me, a subtle gesture that spoke volumes. I nodded inwardly. I was ready to follow her lead, to uncover what she had been protecting for years. By nightfall, the tension was almost unbearable. Every creak, every shadow, every flicker of light seemed to signal that the moment of revelation was near. I lay awake, alert, processing every movement and whisper. I knew that the coming days would be decisive, revealing secrets that could change everything. Morning light filtered through the blinds, casting soft patterns on the floor. Lily was already awake, sitting quietly, her gaze intense and unwavering. I felt a mix of admiration and fear. She was silently commanding the room. I offered breakfast with careful attention, watching for even the smallest reaction. Each motion, each blink seemed to carry meaning, and I focused on deciphering her silent signals. After breakfast, I explored the house cautiously, noting patterns, locked drawers, and subtle clues. Every object seemed meaningful. I realized my in-laws had built more than a home. They had built a carefully controlled world around her. By mid-morning, I noticed her subtle gestures, small movements that hinted at her intelligence and awareness. She was teaching me, communicating silently, testing my understanding. Hours passed with quiet observation. Every blink, every tilt of her head, every gesture was significant. I felt like I was learning a language I had never known, guided by her subtle cues. By afternoon, she whispered softly, almost inaudibly, "They'll be back soon. You have to help me." My heart raced. Her plea was urgent but deliberate. Someone was coming, and I didn't know who or why. Evening approached, and I stayed alert, careful with every movement, every word. She watched me closely, guiding my actions without speaking. Trust was fragile but growing. I realized that this weekend had transformed me. I was no longer just Jessica Smith, caretaker. I was an ally, protector, and witness to a secret far larger than myself. By bedtime, shadows filled the house, stretching across polished floors and immaculate furniture. Tension was tangible, a silent countdown to the coming revelations. I lay on the couch, processing everything, the gestures, whispers, and subtle cues. One thing was certain. The weekend had only begun, and the secrets Lily carried would change everything forever. The morning sun spilled through the blinds, but the warmth didn't reach the tension in the house. Lily was already awake, sitting in her usual spot, eyes sharp and unwavering. Every glance she gave felt like a test, measuring my patience, my attention, and my resolve. I offered her breakfast carefully, mindful of how each movement might be interpreted. She ate deliberately, a slow, calculated rhythm that made me realize this was not just a child's routine, it was a carefully maintained strategy. After breakfast, I explored her space with fresh eyes, noticing subtle signs I had missed before. Small marks on the bookshelves, patterns in her toys, even the arrangement of her blankets. Each detail seemed purposeful, a silent message she had left for someone she trusted. She gestured toward a locked drawer again, her eyes flicking to mine. I understood instantly. I needed to wait to earn full access to her secrets. Trust was fragile, but it was growing one subtle action at a time. The hours passed slowly. We moved through the house in careful rhythm, me following her cues, her observing me. Every gesture carried weight. Every silent signal was a lesson I was eager to learn. By afternoon, I began noticing more of the patterns in her world. The way she shifted her gaze towards certain objects, the subtle movements of her fingers, the slight pauses in her steps. She was guiding me, teaching me to understand her silent language. Evening approached, and the atmosphere in the house felt heavier, more intense. Shadows stretched across the polished floors, each creak in the house amplified in the silence. I knew the moment of revelation was approaching. Lily leaned slightly toward me, a gesture so small it could have been missed. I understood. It was a signal to be alert, to pay attention, to prepare for what was coming. By nightfall, I lay awake, replaying every whisper, every blink, every motion from the day. I felt a growing sense of anticipation, like the quiet before a storm. I knew instinctively that the weekend was about to reach a turning point, and whatever secrets Lily had been protecting would soon demand to be revealed. Morning light filtered softly through the blinds, illuminating Lily's calm, focused expression. She moved with precision, attending to her routines like clockwork. I felt both admiration and unease. Her intelligence was sharp, but her silence carried weight. I prepared breakfast with deliberate care, observing her reactions to each small gesture. Every bite, every movement seemed measured, as if she were silently evaluating my capabilities. Through breakfast, I explored her environment more deeply, noting the subtle arrangements of her toys, books, and furniture. Careful order of everything suggested planning, intention, and hidden knowledge. She gestured toward a cabinet I hadn't considered before, a subtle movement that signaled both caution and trust. I waited, knowing I had to respect her pace and timing. Trust had to be earned, not demanded. Throughout the morning, I focused on observing every subtle motion, the tilt of her head, the flicker of her eyes, the gentle movements of her fingers. She was teaching me to understand her silent world. By afternoon, I realized the stakes were higher than I imagined. Her whispered words about money were no joke. Someone was scheming, and she had been carrying the burden alone. My responsibility had grown far beyond simple care. Evening descended, and the house felt heavier, almost alive with tension. Each shadow, each creak in the floorboards seemed to signal that something was imminent. I remained alert, aware that every moment was critical. Lily offered a faint smile as we moved through the evening, a subtle acknowledgement of trust. I understood that she had chosen me as her ally, and that I had to honor that choice with unwavering attention. Night fell and I lay on the couch, replaying every gesture, every whisper, every clue from the day. I realized that the weekend had already transformed me, teaching me patience, perception, and vigilance. I knew that the coming days would reveal secrets, test loyalties, and change everything I thought I understood about Lily and her world. The morning arrived with crisp clarity, but the calm was deceptive. Lily was already awake, moving through her routines with quiet, precise intention. Her eyes met mine, a silent question in their depth. "Are you ready?" I prepared her breakfast meticulously, arranging everything in a way that felt reassuring and deliberate. She ate slowly, deliberately, testing my patience and attentiveness. Every subtle gesture was meaningful, and I concentrated on decoding them. Through breakfast, I studied the subtle arrangements of her toys and books, noticing patterns that suggested planning and hidden knowledge. I realized her environment was more than organized. It was a carefully crafted system of communication. She led me toward the locked cabinet once more, her eyes flicking to mine. I understood immediately. I needed to demonstrate patience and respect before any secrets would be revealed. Trust was the key, and I had to honor it fully. Hours passed with a careful rhythm, observing her movements, gestures, and subtle cues. Each interaction revealed more of her intelligence and awareness, and I felt increasingly connected to her silent world. By afternoon, I pieced together small clues she had been leaving for me: a tilt of the head, a shift of the hand, a fleeting glance. She was guiding me carefully, teaching me to understand her language without words. Evening approached, and tension filled the house like electricity. Shadows stretched across the polished floors, and the silence was heavy, alive with unspoken messages. She leaned slightly toward me, a tiny motion, signaling that the moment was approaching. I understood. Preparation was critical, vigilance essential. By nightfall, I lay awake, processing every whisper, blink, and gesture. The stakes were higher than ever, and the weekend's turning point was imminent. I knew instinctively that the secrets Lily had protected for years were about to surface, and that everything would change. Morning light painted the walls with soft, golden hues, but the warmth couldn't mask the tension. Lily was already awake, eyes alert, scanning me with quiet intensity. I felt the weight of responsibility settle over me like a heavy cloak. I prepared breakfast with care, observing her reaction to every movement. Each bite, each gesture was deliberate, a test I had to pass. I focused intently, knowing every detail mattered. After breakfast, I explored the subtle nuances of her space, noting the precise placement of objects, the careful alignment of books, and the arrangement of toys. Each detail seemed to contain meaning, a silent code I was slowly learning to read. She gestured toward a small locked drawer, her eyes conveying urgency and trust simultaneously. I waited patiently, aware that only patience would earn the full truth. Trust was delicate but growing. Hours passed with quiet observation. Every blink, every tilt of the head, every movement of her hands revealed layers of intelligence and awareness. She was teaching me her silent language, piece by piece. By afternoon, I realized the gravity of her whispered warning about money. Someone had been scheming, and she had carried the burden alone for years. My role had evolved from caretaker to protector, confidant, and ally. Evening descended, filling the house with shadows and the weight of anticipation. Each creak in the floorboards and flicker of light felt loaded with significance. The weekend's climax was drawing near. Lily offered a subtle smile, a sign of trust and approval. I understood that she had chosen me as her ally, and that the responsibility was immense. By nightfall, I lay awake, reflecting on her gestures and whispered warnings. The weekend had already transformed me, demanding patience, perception, and unwavering vigilance. I knew the coming days would reveal secrets, test loyalties, and challenge everything I thought I understood about Lily and her world. The next morning, sunlight filtered gently through the blinds, but the house felt heavier than ever. Lily was already awake, sitting in her usual spot, eyes sharp and unwavering. Every glance seemed loaded with meaning, as if she were silently urging me to be ready. I prepared breakfast carefully, observing her smallest movements, learning her rhythm. Each gesture she made seemed intentional, a silent test of my patience and attention. I had grown increasingly aware that every detail mattered, that trust was everything. After breakfast, she led me through the house, stopping at the cabinet she had been signaling for days. Her eyes flicked toward me, filled with a mixture of urgency and hope. I nodded, signaling I was ready to follow her lead. The locked drawer yielded a small stack of documents and envelopes. Her hands trembled slightly as she handed them to me. I realized immediately that these were important, valuable proof of her whispered warning. Someone had been manipulating her, scheming behind closed doors. Hours passed as we carefully examined the papers, deciphering codes, dates, and hidden messages. Lily stayed close, guiding me silently, her trust growing with every shared discovery. The weight of responsibility pressed down, but I felt stronger knowing we were in this together. By afternoon, the pieces of the puzzle began to align. The truth about her inheritance, her in-laws' intentions, and the danger she had faced for years became painfully clear. Lily had been right. She was at risk, and I had to act. Evening approached, and I felt a mix of fear and determination. Every creak of the house, every flicker of shadow seemed to signal that time was short. I had to protect her, and fast. Lily leaned close, whispering the words I had feared to hear. "They'll be back tonight. You have to keep me safe." My heart raced. The moment of confrontation was almost here. By nightfall, I had organized everything we needed: plans, safe spaces, and strategies. The tension was unbearable, but Lily's calm, confident presence reassured me. We were ready for what was coming. I lay awake, listening to the silence, knowing that tonight would reveal secrets that would change everything for all of us. The house was dark, save for the faint glow of the nightlight in Lily's room. Every creak, every whisper of wind made my heart race. I could feel the approaching presence of my in-laws, and I knew the climax was near. Lily moved silently beside me, a reassuring presence. Her eyes were sharp, alert, and filled with trust. I realized how much responsibility she had placed on me, how much faith she had in my ability to protect her. Suddenly, the front door opened. Shadows filled the hallway as my in-laws returned earlier than expected. I froze, trying to remain calm, my mind racing with the plan we had devised. Lily gestured toward the documents, signaling me to keep them safe. I understood immediately. Everything depended on protecting her evidence, her truth. One wrong move could destroy everything we had worked for. They entered the living room, smiling politely, unaware that we had uncovered their schemes. Every step they took seemed calculated, yet oblivious to the storm quietly building against them. I watched their expressions carefully, noting every subtle reaction, every pause. Lily remained calm beside me, a silent anchor of courage and intelligence. Her trust was a gift I couldn't squander. By mid-evening, the confrontation began. Questions were asked and answers carefully avoided. I maintained composure, guiding Lily with subtle cues, ensuring we remained safe while gathering the truth. Finally, a misstep from my in-laws revealed their intentions: the schemes, the manipulations, the lies, all exposed through the documents Lily had entrusted to me. I felt a rush of vindication and dread simultaneously. Lily looked up at me, her eyes gleaming with quiet triumph. We had uncovered everything, and the truth was finally ours. Power dynamic had shifted, silently but irrevocably. As the night deepened, I realized that the weekend had transformed us both. Lily's whispered warning had been real, her trust earned, and our lives forever changed. The aftermath was surreal. My in-laws were confronted with undeniable evidence of their manipulations. They attempted excuses, half-hearted denials, and feigned surprise, but the truth could not be hidden. Lily remained calm, her silence now a tool of strength. I felt pride and awe. She had carried this burden for years and had navigated it with intelligence far beyond her years. We moved through the house carefully, ensuring all documents and evidence were secure. Each step was deliberate, a silent assertion of our control. Tension had shifted. We were no longer just participants, we were in command. By afternoon, my in-laws' demeanor had changed. Their confidence eroded, replaced with caution and hesitation. They realized that Lily was not helpless, and I was not naive. I watched Lily closely, amazed at her composure. Her whispered words, her subtle gestures, had guided us through a perilous situation. She had taught me patience, vigilance, and courage. Evening came, and I felt a strange sense of closure. The tension remained, but it was tempered by the satisfaction of exposing the truth. The balance had shifted in our favor. We shared a quiet moment together, sitting in the living room. I didn't need words to understand her gratitude and trust. Every glance, every subtle gesture spoke volumes. By nightfall, the house felt lighter, yet charged with a new energy. Secrets had been revealed, trust had been tested, and alliances solidified. I realized that the weekend had not only changed our circumstances but had reshaped us both, creating a bond forged in silence, strategy, and trust. As I lay on the couch that night, I reflected on everything. The whispered words, the hidden documents, the silent coordination, it had all led to this moment. And the truth had finally emerged. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the blinds, bathing the house in golden light. Tension from the previous days had lifted slightly, replaced by a sense of cautious relief. Lily moved through her morning routine, calm and collected, her trust in me now absolute. I prepared breakfast carefully, observing her smallest gestures, noting the subtle ways she expressed comfort and assurance. Our silent communication had become seamless, a bond forged through shared experience and understanding. After breakfast, I took stock of everything we had accomplished. The documents, the evidence, the revelations, they were secure. Lily's secret, her intelligence, and her courage had been validated. By midday, my in-laws had retreated into quiet reflection. Their schemes exposed, they no longer held the control they once assumed. The balance of power had shifted irrevocably. I watched Lily closely, marveling at her resilience. She had endured manipulation, secrecy, and fear, yet emerged stronger, smarter, and more aware. I felt a deep respect and admiration for her strength. Evening approached, and we sat quietly together. No words were necessary. The shared understanding between us, built over days of vigilance, silence, and subtle communication, was complete. By nightfall, I realized the weekend had changed more than just circumstances. It had transformed us both. We had navigated danger, uncovered secrets, and emerged stronger, bonded by trust and intelligence. Lily looked at me, her eyes gleaming with quiet triumph. She had survived, taught, and guided me. I had protected, supported, and learned from her. Together, we had won. As I lay on the couch one final time, I reflected on the entire weekend. The whispered words, the silent gestures, the hidden evidence, it had all led to this moment. A secret once held in fear had been revealed, and justice quietly served. And in that moment I understood fully. Some bonds, built in silence and trust, are stronger than any spoken words, and some secrets, once uncovered, change everything forever.